Da 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 da. What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes. Get those notifications out. Let people know I've gone live. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside, and I did a little bit of both today. I think it's really, really important that we spend physically in this day to day that each one of us has. Because I know for myself that, worry and stress and being compulsive, and also in that self talk that we also do, because we are not physically being active in the world. Lots of times, I call it myself that I procrastinate. Like even tonight, I wanted to do my live show early, right? I really enjoyed going for a walk last night, but then I thought, oh, it's cooling right off. I don't want to go for a walk today. I'm all bagged. I had a busy day. And I felt guilty in that. I felt that I was procrastinating and I felt I was not taking care of myself because I've been on such a good routine of connecting with the real world. Not even taking into consideration that I was active today in the real world, but it was different, right? It wasn't in going for a walk and doing my house chores, those routines that we get so comfortable in. For myself, I have always been an experiencer, and that's the truth. It's growing up in a dynamic family. It's a little bit being a feral child, a little bit maybe growing up a little bit earlier than what most children do. Maybe it was in that, right? Not having anything to do, not having friends, not having projects, not having chores. Like even as kids, you would think that there was something more than keeping your room clean. And we didn't have anything other than that to be responsible for in growing up. I don't know why, but it's just right. My parents were big on free choice. And we grew up pretty feral. Each one of us children grew up differently, grew up amazingly, right? But dynamic with issues and great points, and probably a little bit of that self talk that I was doing to myself tonight when I'm saying, oh, I don't think I want to go for a walk today. Maybe I'll do my live show early. And then, 10 o'clock rolls around and, oh, we'll give it another half an hour. We'll give it another, what am I going to, and then I start going into my head, right? And I thought, oh my goodness, Cindy, already doing that. So one thing I love to do is I love other people's perspectives, other people's ideas, experiencing vicariously sometimes other people's lives and relating it to my own life, not beating myself up because they've gotten further than I have, or they got more money than I have, they're prettier, they're smarter, they got better camera gear, right? Though these things that I mentioned obviously come to my mind on occasion, but as fast as they come in, it's just like a breeze running through me. They're just thoughts, right? Today I came across a lady, well, just recently actually, in thinking about how I can beat myself out without really beat myself up, without really reflecting on what I really contribute to my own life. And what I contribute to my life is not stressing and worrying in those things that maybe some people think that I should be stressing and worrying about. They say stress and worry cause 75% of our health issues. I am very grateful. For the most part of my life, I have been fairly healthy, even though in my own decisions and in my own choices, right? I was an overeater and I allowed myself to get obese. I have been a bit of a fawner and a people pleaser in my life because, again, it's in that dynamic experience that I had as a child that, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to belong. I wanted to find my place, which brings me into why I love other people's perspectives, other people's ideas on things. And it's not necessarily ideas on life, but again, like I said, living vicariously through somebody else's experience. I happened onto this lady. I'd never happened onto her comment or content before, right? And I thought, oh, I'll sit on this video. It's only 8 minutes. I can be 8 minutes late for my live, even though by then I'm like an hour late for going into my live, right? But I took in her content, and she was at first talking about all these aspects of her life that kind of beat her down, that kind of stressed her out, made her worry, made her reflect and think and compulse. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that sounded a little bit like me even 10 years ago, right? Because I was always in my head, and not always in my head, again, like I said, being a people pleaser, a fawner, living vicariously through other people's lives that, I wasn't living within my own life, though I thought, right? And she started talking about being a little bit of a armchair philosopher. This is something new to me, right? Because I used to be so compulsed in my worries and in my stress and in my fawning and people pleasing and, oh, right? That was my real world. That was my physical world, right? And I really drove myself batty in that. And that self-talk kind of took over, and I kind of talked myself into being somebody that was these emotions, these compulsions that I had brought on in my own life. Now, over the past half a dozen years or so, I find that, if I'm going to be honest, that I have still been compulsing, because this digital age, this age of AI learning, has offered up an opportunity for me to even go deeper in living in vicariously in other people's lives. Hello, Eugene. I'm very good tonight. Thank you. I hope you're doing amazing tonight too. But this day and age has offered up an opportunity for me to delve even deeper into understanding emotions, because it all stemmed from wanting to understand my emotions and understanding why I was stressed and why I was worried, and right, and starting to understand about these coping mechanisms that I had, not just living vicariously through other people's lives, thinking that I didn't have a life worthy of creating for myself, but not even recognizing that being that feral child, right, and only having that one chore as a kid, right? Making sure my room was clean. That was my only responsibility. And I got my allowance every Saturday for keeping my room clean, right? That it was in that bumbling along, and it was in the physicality of those experiences. And, you know, those looking in and living vicariously through other people's lives was just a way for me to better understand my own life, right? And to recognize, and yeah, I recognized these things later on in my life. It was like I was like 57 years old before I started waking up to any of these ideas. And I've been in it for a while. But to wonder that I grew up as a child, as a preteen, as a teenager, as a young adult, and as a mature adult under extreme worry and stress, and yet my health was pretty good when you compare it to the other people in my life, like specifically even within my own family. Everybody in my family has ailments and diseases, heart disease, diabetes, oh my goodness, back issues, gallbladders, arthritis, strokes. Like, and yet I had nothing. And I was under extreme stress, constant, 24/7. I think the reason I stayed so healthy is that little bit of idea that, I was an experiencer. And because I was always striving to create a wonderful life for myself, because I could see, because I live vicariously through other people's lives, what magnificent lives they were making for themselves. And I thought, even though I was a people pleaser, even though I was living vicariously through other people's lives, I was learning in that process. And when I say I just woke up when I was 57 years old to some of these ideas, I truly don't believe that's the case. I think it's been a learning process for me ever since I was a little child, right? Even when it wasn't an opportunity to learn through AI learning, because in those days we had dial telephones, party lines, right? Our calculators were like this big, and when you bought a calculator, they had a plug, and they cost you $60. Now you can get them for like $1 at the dollar store, right? But now I think to myself, how well did that serve me in growing up in the 60s and 70s, and then maturing and allowing myself to be pulled in to the digital age, into the age of AI learning, that I'm able to look at different perspectives and not take, I've never ever took them on as my own. I siphon through all of them. I find it very curious as to how people work, and how the system of the world works, but also use that opportunity in AI learning to delve deep into topics that, I never dreamed that I would be able to delve into, because, these were topics that you learn in university. And I never went past high school. I did like a couple of weeks of college before I quit that. And learning was through living vicariously through other people's experiences, and then being an experiencer myself, again in that people pleasing and fawning and daydreaming to, oh my goodness, I wish my life was like that. But at the same time, experiencing every opportunity to improve my life, to experiment in different ways as to how to make my life better. And there were opportunities in my life that I was able, again, in making choices for myself. And that's why I say it's so important for us to be making choices in our life, and not just making choices in our life, because we know when we make a choice, change happens. So I would much rather be behind the steering wheel of that change rather than, like when I was a kid, being the experiencer and just like a bumper car, just being right, tossed around and bumping into things and learning from my boo-boos and my mistakes. And even then, there were lessons in that, right? Because those are experiences, physical, physical experiences, physical meaning that I'm experiencing that. Now I use this AI learning, this age of AI learning, as an opportunity to understand how other people tick. Because I come to feel like I know how I tick. I know what sets me off. I know what makes me happy. I know what calms my soul. I know what I got right. I know what I got wrong. I know where the blame lies. I know where the problems are. I know where the solutions are. And again, it's in my choices whether or not, right, to pursue some of those choices for myself. But that isn't free choice. And in making a choice, change happens. I choose to lose 20 pounds, right? I lost 20 pounds recently, so I'm using that as an example. I choose to lose 20 pounds, but without putting the action into that choice, I would have been left to the demise of that choice, right? I made a choice. Change is going to happen. But maybe that change would have been in me beating myself up and stressing myself out and making myself all worried and right about not losing that weight. Because like I said yesterday, we were talking about, when you want to be in the Olympics, you want that gold medal. You just don't make that choice that I want to be the Olympics and I want that gold medal and then just sit back and wait for it to happen. No, you have to be in the physical, right? You have to be that motivator for yourself in taking that action and failing and getting up and brushing your knees off and falling again and right inconsistently if you want to lose that 20 pounds, right? So when I heard this lady saying that she was a bit of an armchair philosopher, and I said, oh my goodness, I'm not that, right? I take in the lessons, but I am an experiencer. But I'm an experiencer by making choices and then motivating myself in making those choices happen, or making those goals happen, or making those dreams happen. It is all in the action, 100%. I could sit here and say, I want to be in the Olympics. I want that gold medal. I could make that choice. But when that doesn't happen, what's going to happen? I'm going to beat myself up. I'm going to fill myself up with shame and guilt. And then I'm going to be looking for excuses as to why it didn't happen. And you can guarantee that it won't even cross my mind that it was because, right, I didn't take that action. That I made the choice, but I didn't take any action. It was just a dream, right? It was just a wish. But you have to put that movement in physically, right? And so today I was so busy in my day. I went out with my sister, took her to the hospital for some tests. We did some thrifting today, found some great scores, right? And then I came home, made my dinner, and then I sat down and I was just like, oh, I should do some cleaning. Oh, I should go for a walk. Maybe I'll do my live show over. And then I'm just thinking, Cindy, you're tired. You've had a busy full day. But I'm beating myself up. Why? Because I'm not physically doing anything. I'm just sitting in my chair. So what do? Right? You take that action. And I love working in emotions. And it's just not understanding my emotions, because my emotions are so different than anybody else's emotions, and anybody else's emotions is different than the next person's. So it's being able to live vicariously, which I have always done in my entire life, right? To live vicariously through other people's experiences so I can understand how they tick. And when I do that, I'm going, oh my goodness, right? And I see where people get things wrong, just where I see where I get things wrong. And I see where they get things right. And I go, oh my goodness, this lady has a point. I'm an armchair philosopher too. I'm thinking, but in different perspectives. And the fact that is, she's a YouTube creator. So she's obviously in the physical, right? Maybe this is her goal in life as a YouTube creator. Maybe she shares her ideas and she has clients and stuff. For myself, see this blank, because I do this for myself. And I do this so that I could truly understand people, so that my interactions with them, right? Not like I'll ever meet her, but I may meet people who have the same kind of perspectives, right? Who, or don't have the same perspectives, but maybe some of the same ideas, and be able to have solutions and ideas when they start grumbling and complaining about how they're not getting anywhere. This lady here had some great insights. I really did resonate with quite a bit about what she was saying. But I kind of felt, I don't know, because this is the first time I've seen her. I don't know, other than what she was saying about earlier, before she had picked up some of these perspectives, how it changed her life. But it didn't seem that there was a lot of joy. It didn't seem like there was a lot of physicality, experience in her life. Her experience was all in here and not in the physical, right? Maybe in her goals, right? In her ambitions and dreams of being a YouTube creator, that she wished that this was going to be her business, possibly, right? But it didn't feel joyous. It felt like a job, right? The way she was coming across, and the way she was talking about, you know, how she felt this way, and all these things and troubles and all this stuff that she had going on her entire life, how she just let it go and it didn't mean anything. It was all gone. It was just all gone. And I just would not want any of my emotions. I wouldn't want any of my experiences to be gone. That's my life. That's 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 my life. I don't want to be in here all the time, and maybe in those feelings that I had when I came home after a busy day in the physical world, right? And I sat down, maybe it was the fact that I really wanted to be even more physical than I was, that I wanted to be more of an experiencer rather than experiencing vicariously through somebody else's experience. And that's pretty new for me too, because I've been going pretty deep in the past half a dozen years in really trying to understand not just myself, but understand others, right? Because we all have interactions with each other, or at the very least, we should have experiences and interactions with others, right? I know in this age of AI learning, right, this digital age, uh, it's making us isolated. Every single one of us isolated, and I do not want to spend my life just living vicariously through other people. I want to have my own experiences. I want to continue to make my own choices, right? And set goals and have dreams, but just not have dreams, but move towards making my dreams happen. Why? Cindy's only got this life, right? Cindy's not coming back. Maybe some of those other parts of me will be. But Cindy is not coming back. And I do not want to spend my life as an armchair philosopher, even though, right, for some people it comes naturally, it comes from dynamic upbringings, it comes from trauma, it comes from hypervigilance, it's coming from wanting to understand, right, what we got right and what we got wrong. That makes sense. But why can't it be in the physical too? Why can't we physically experience our lives? Put those lessons into practice, because it's doing nobody any good just being in here. At the very least, I would like to interact with my customers. I would like to interact with my family. I would like to interact with total strangers, right? And not just strangers that because, they're going live or they're filming content and stuff, that you can feel that the joy is not there. And when you feel that the joy is not there, it makes you wonder, right? Are they happy? Are they making choices and moving towards their choices? Or are they just accepting that this is what life is, and then just kind of sitting there and waiting to see what comes to them? I would never, ever be that person, right? It's not a good way to live. It's not a fun way to live. And if you're anything like me, you'll beat yourself up for it, right? Because that's not the person you want to be. You want to have the best life that you can make for yourself. You want to create the best human being that you possibly can. So why can't we mix the physicality and the emotional and the mental all together? That's truly dynamic, right? That's truly dynamic. And that's something to think about, but, right, put it into practice in your everyday, day-to-day. So if I came home tonight and I sat down and right, oh, I don't want to go for a walk today. Well, then don't go for a walk, right? What else do you want to do? Do you want to make some dinner? You want to dust your shelves? I'm looking at the dust on my shelves, right? Or do you want to take in some lessons and live vicariously through somebody else's experience and maybe learn something by that? Which is what I did in my procrastination, so I call it. But it was just me being done with the physical part of my day and then just trying to fill a little bit of this up, right? Being that armchair philosopher. That's great terminology. I've heard it a couple of times, and I never took it as reference to myself in any way. But then again, right, through my choices, I have been at it, right? I stay in the lessons. I stay in the conversation. I stay in practicing my craft and paying attention, right, into what I got right and what I got wrong and making choices to right my wrongs, right? And to work harder in what I do get right to make it even better. And, right, mixing the turnips with the mashed potatoes in order to get it down. And it's not necessarily that, because I do love sitting in and living vicariously, because that's where all the goodies are. That's where all the lessons are, right? That's where all the insights are. But I want to love my life. And so I make choices, right? And sometimes those choices don't make sense. They don't seem plausible. They don't, right? They're my camping trip coming up in 2 weeks, that shouldn't be happening. But because I made that choice that, okay, we're going on holidays, we're going to take our trip like we do every September, right? We're going on our trip, and you just start moving towards that, right? And things sort themselves out. But if I didn't make any movement, if I just sat here and just waited for that trip to September, where would I have the car? Where would I get the gas money? Right? Where would I be able to pay for those camping spots? And that trip would not happen. And what would happen? I'd be an armchair philosopher living vicariously through somebody else's experience and beating myself up, right? And blaming others and blaming circumstances for why these things don't happen in my life, right? You make the choices. You make a choice and you just start moving towards it. And of course, there are going to be hiccups and failures in that. But that's healthy stress. That's healthy worry. And I believe, because I've been doing that for the most part of my life, it's why I haven't gotten sick, right? Because I've stayed in both the physical, the mental, and the emotional world, right? Yes, maybe been way too hypervigilant, but even in my hypervigilance, oh my goodness, that gives me lessons. That gives me serious gifts. And that has made me avoid the wrong kind of people in my life, the wrong jobs, right? Get myself out of sticky situations, right? And in my hypervigilance, it keeps me grounded in what I need to get done in the physical world so that I can create the best life for myself as I possibly can. And I do that, right? And I do that. A lot of people think, oh my goodness, like, how's that even possible? Why are you going off camping all by yourself? Because, right, I'm not here to entertain people, right? Even though sometimes I'm sure you guys think I'm pretty entertaining, right? But I'm here to just be happy, to just be pleased that I didn't waste my life, right? I get this one life. Cindy gets this one life, right? And life is what happens to you while you're making other plans. And I sure would love to keep making other plans, because that's just loading on more experiences. more experiences in the physical part of my life, and more experiences in living vicariously through others. Okay, you guys, we're just going to pick a card and we're going to call it a night. It was just curious. I just found it so curious. I just love looking at people's lives, living vicariously a little bit through their experiences. Very rarely do I take their experiences in as my own, even though tonight I did recognize that maybe I am a little bit of an armchair philosopher. But that could change in a moment, couldn't it? Could be an opportunity. It could be saying yes to something. It could be bumping into a stranger and having my whole life turned upside down because, right, instantly I have attached myself being, well, I think I've gone past those lessons by now. I think in my understandings I would make some good choices. But if I felt like I wanted to move towards that, you can guarantee I would. And I'm not afraid of the stress, and I'm not afraid of the worry because I've been in it all my life. All my life, I've had that in me, right? But because I balance it out with the joys and in the evidence that I can make a choice and move towards it and create the best life for myself as I possibly can, right? I would know instantly that was a bunch of hogwash if I started talking to myself like that. And that's the truth, right? I don't want to lose my joy. I don't want to give up even in the crappy experiences that I've had in my life because they have served lessons that I would never get anywhere else, even living vicariously through somebody else. And there are people out there who've had worse experiences and better experiences, right, than I have. But mine are no less magical, majestic, beautiful landscapes, right? And full of lessons that might lead me into making another choice, a better choice maybe, that might take me into a totally different experience. But it would have to be in my choices and in taking the action, right, towards that new choice in order to have a new experience, right? Can't just sit here and wait for it to happen. Tomorrow we're going to do some dusting. We're going to hang out in the house, and get a little bit of packing and sorting, and right, we're moving towards this trip that I'm taking in 2 weeks, and I have to keep it top of mind because, right, it's only through my choices that these amazing experiences happen in my life, right? And these experiences that make me happy, right? Make me feel that it was a life worth living and it was a life well lived. And I don't think that I would ever think otherwise, even amongst all the crappy that comes into our lives on a daily basis for some of us, right? That when I'm 114 years old, right, my affirmations, I want to be 114 years old to live at least till that time, that I could be sitting in my rocking chair on my porch, my wraparound porch, right? Looking out at the farm fields and the mountains, maybe a lake, and be happy with the life that I created for myself, right? And not just, right, created for myself because I wished it and I dreamed it and I set those goals, but because I took those actions, right, to make them happen. Okay, you guys, let's just pick a card. If you haven't popped into one of my lives before, these are just 54 powerful words. First perspective, first thing that comes to my mind when I see the card, and we'll just go into it for a couple of minutes, and then we'll call it a night, right? and we'll start all over tomorrow, right? And what tomorrow looks like, I don't know. It'll be in my choices. Here we go. Oh my goodness. We had this word this week already. Isn't that strange? Community. Community offers up a sense of belonging, right? Today, I belong to myself, right? Today, I take care of myself. My sister, right? We went out and had the most amazing day. She was part of my community. The few strangers that I had interactions with today, that was part of my community. Even sitting here vicariously, listening in to a conversation by a total stranger and living vicariously through that. That was my community today. And through my choices, right, my community could change tomorrow in an instant. I've had so many opportunities and so many different communities that I have belonged to in my life. But I would have to say the best community I have ever had for myself was with myself. That partnership with myself in being that armchair philosopher. Armchair philosopher. That's pretty. Sounds pretty good. I don't know. We'll give it some more thought. Just came to my mind tonight. You guys, that's my good cheer. We'll see each other tomorrow. And yeah, I hope everybody has a great night and a great day. You're just starting it. Thank you guys for popping in.